The morning had already started with noise, the kind of steady, sharp noise that fills the halls of a big hotel when everyone seems to be in a hurry. Phones ringing, elevator doors opening, luggage wheels rattling across marble floors, conversations blending together into one messy hum. At the center of it all, near the tall windows of the Grand Marlow Hotel, walked a man who didn't seem to notice any of it. His name was Ethan Hale, and he was exactly the kind of person people looked at twice. He carried himself like someone who always knew where he was going, and how much it cost to get there. His suit was pressed, his shoes shone, and his voice was calm but quick, almost like it had been trained to never waste time. He held a phone close to his ear, speaking in short, confident bursts. His assistant walked behind him holding a tablet and a paper cup of coffee, trying to keep up. They had been walking through the lobby for 5 minutes, yet Ethan hadn't looked up once. The deal he was discussing was worth millions, and he was deep in negotiations with investors overseas. "Listen, I'm not saying we pull out," he said into the phone, his tone controlled but sharp. "I'm saying we wait. There's too much movement in that market. We need a cleaner entry point. Let the others rush. We'll stay patient." He turned slightly, nodding to something his assistant whispered, but his eyes remained fixed on nothing. His mind was elsewhere, numbers, strategies, deadlines. His life was made of them. And then, from somewhere across the lobby, came a sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, so soft it barely rose above the chatter of people checking out and the echo of rolling luggage. A piano, just a few notes. The melody was delicate and careful, as if someone were testing the keys. Ethan's voice faltered for a second. His assistant noticed and looked up, confused. "Sir?" "Nothing," he muttered quickly and kept walking. But his eyes shifted slightly toward the sound. The piano wasn't unusual. The hotel kept one near the window, a glossy black upright that guests sometimes played for fun. Usually it was background music, light jazz, an old pop song, something that drifted through the lobby like perfume. But this tune was different. It wasn't polished. It wasn't fast. It was slow, halting, and strangely backward. He frowned. He didn't mean to, but something about the way the notes fell made him stop mid-step. He lifted a finger to his assistant to wait and slowly turned toward the sound. At the piano sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her hair was tied back with a loose ribbon, and her feet didn't reach the pedals. She leaned forward as she played, her fingers small and hesitant. But every note had a kind of care, a focus that made the mistakes feel almost beautiful. She wasn't just playing a random song. She was playing something that made Ethan's chest tighten without warning. He didn't recognize it at first. The melody felt tangled, twisted, and wrong somehow, like it was being told backward. But even in reverse, something about it was painfully familiar. It was a tune he hadn't heard in years. His hand, the one holding the phone, slowly lowered. The voice on the other end of the call kept talking, but he wasn't listening anymore. The sound from the piano filled the space between him and the rest of the lobby. It filled something else too, a quiet he hadn't known was still inside him. He remembered that song. He remembered it from a time before suits and meetings, before he was known for anything. When he was just a boy sitting by a window on rainy evenings, listening to his mother hum that exact tune while she cooked. It had been her favorite. She used to tell him it sounded like hope trying to stand back up. But this version was different. The little girl was playing it backward. The final notes came first, the middle twisted into the start. And yet it still carried that same warmth, like a mirror reflection of something lost but not gone. "Ethan," the voice on the phone said again, faint and distant. "Are you still there?" He blinked, realizing the call hadn't ended. He turned slightly away from the piano and said quietly, "Give me a moment." Then, before his assistant could speak, he lowered the phone completely and just listened. It had been years since he'd stopped for anything that wasn't business. His days ran on schedules, his emotions tucked neatly behind polite smiles. But this sound, this simple, imperfect song from a child, broke through all of it. The girl seemed unaware of her small audience. A few people had started watching from nearby chairs, smiling softly. One older woman even whispered, "How sweet." But the girl didn't look up. She was lost in her own little world, her fingers dancing carefully across the keys. When she reached the end, or rather, the beginning and of the song, She let her hands rest on the piano and exhaled. Satisfied, Ethan found himself clapping once softly. The sound startled her. She turned, her eyes wide, clearly unsure if she was in trouble for touching the hotel's piano. He smiled slightly, a rare, genuine smile that surprised even him. That was... He paused, searching for the right word. Beautiful. She blushed and looked down. I played it backwards, she said shyly. I'm practicing. Backwards? He repeated, curious. She nodded. It's supposed to be a game. My dad says if I can play a song backwards, I'll never forget it. Her answer caught him off guard. He stared for a moment, wondering if the universe had decided to send him this small, strange miracle in the middle of his most stressful day. What's the song called? He asked softly. She hesitated. I don't know the name. My dad just said it's an old song. It sounds nice when I play it the other way, too. Ethan's chest tightened again. Of course she didn't know. The song was probably older than her father. His mother had loved it before the girl's parents were even born. He wanted to tell her that he knew it, that she'd just brought back something precious. But the words stuck. Instead, he just nodded and said, You played it very well. Her smile was small but sincere. Thank you, mister. He turned slightly, noticing that his assistant was still standing there, awkwardly pretending to scroll through the tablet. The phone in his hand buzzed. The investors calling back. The world was ready to pull him back into its noise. But for one more moment he didn't move. The lobby seemed different now, quieter, softer. The morning rush had continued without him, yet he felt as though time had paused. As the little girl slid off the piano bench and skipped toward the far side of the lobby, where a man, her father maybe, was waiting, Ethan stood still. The song lingered in his mind, looping backward and forward at the same time. He hadn't thought about his mother in years. Not really. But now her voice and laughter seemed to echo faintly in his memory. He looked down at his phone, the screen glowing with missed calls. He sighed and finally answered. Yes, he said, his voice quieter this time. I'm here. He glanced back toward the piano, now empty, the keys reflecting the morning light, and added softly, Let's finish this later. The assistant blinked. Later, sir? Yes, later. Ethan walked toward the window, away from the noise of his business world, and for the first time in years he just stood still. He could still hear the reversed melody echoing in his head, a strange and beautiful reminder that life had more to offer than schedules and deals. It was only a few minutes. A small moment, barely enough to notice in the grand timeline of his day. But something inside him had shifted. He didn't know it yet. But that song, that backwards tune played by a little girl, would become the beginning of a story that would change everything about how he saw his life, his success, and even what it meant to listen. The next morning, the hotel lobby was quieter than usual. The weekend crowd had left and the sound of rolling suitcases had faded into an occasional echo. Soft sunlight poured through the wide glass doors, spilling across the marble floor and the polished piano near the window. Ethan arrived earlier than he ever had before. He didn't really know why he came down so soon. He told himself he just needed coffee before another long day of meetings. But deep down he knew that wasn't the reason. He found himself glancing toward the piano almost as soon as he stepped into the lobby. It was empty. The lid was closed, the stool tucked neatly underneath. The air felt still. He didn't even realize he'd been expecting to hear that odd, backward melody again until he didn't. He ordered his coffee, checked a few messages, and sat near the window, his eyes drifting toward the piano every few seconds. Maybe it had just been a random moment. Maybe the little girl was a guest who had already left. He tried to convince himself of that. Yet the song still played in his mind, both backward and forward, twisting through his thoughts like a ribbon that wouldn't untie. After half an hour, he gave up trying to focus on his work. He stood, coffee still half full, and walked toward the piano. He placed his hand lightly on the top of it, the smooth surface cool against his palm. For a moment he thought about sitting down to play, but it had been too long. He couldn't even remember the last time his fingers touched keys. He turned to walk away. And then he heard it. Soft footsteps behind him. He looked back and saw the same little girl from the day before. She wore the same ribbon in her hair, but now she carried a small backpack that looked too big for her, She stopped a few steps away from him, clearly surprised to see him there. "Oh," she said softly. "You're the man from yesterday," Ethan smiled. "That's right. And you're the pianist." She giggled a little and shook her head. "Not really. I just practice sometimes. The man at the desk said I could use it again this morning." "That's kind of him," Ethan replied, stepping aside so she could sit down. She placed her bag on the floor and climbed onto the piano stool. Her feet still didn't reach the pedals, but she sat with the same focus as before. She opened the lid, pressed a few keys, and began to play. This time it wasn't the same song. The notes were lighter, curious, a small melody that sounded like someone asking questions with sound instead of words. Her fingers made tiny mistakes here and there, but she didn't stop. Ethan sat back down near the window, pretending to check his phone, though he didn't type a single word. He just listened. There was something about the way she played that made time slow down. When she finished, he clapped softly again. She turned and smiled shyly. "You really like playing, don't you?" he asked. She nodded. "My dad says music helps me think. Does he play too?" "Mm-hmm. He used to play in a small restaurant," she said proudly. "But now he tunes pianos. He's working today, somewhere upstairs. I wait here until he's done." Ethan leaned forward. "So that's why you're here?" She nodded again. "Sometimes he lets me come with him. He says I can practice as long as I don't make too much noise." Ethan smiled. "I don't think anyone could call that noise." The girl grinned, clearly pleased by the compliment. She hesitated for a second and then said, "Do you know how to play?" He laughed softly. "A little. A long time ago." "Then you should try again." Her innocent suggestion caught him off guard. No one had told him to try again in years, not with work, not with anything. In his world, there was only do or don't, success or failure. There wasn't space for something as forgiving as trying. He looked at the piano again. "Maybe I will," he said. The girl tilted her head. "You can play now if you want." He hesitated. "I'm not sure I remember how." She smiled mischievously. "You could play the same song I did, but forward." Her words struck him again like they had the day before. The same song. The one his mother used to play. He took a slow breath, walked over, and sat beside her on the bench. The stool was small and their shoulders almost touched. His reflection stared back from the glossy black surface of the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys, feeling awkward, almost clumsy. Then with a deep breath, he pressed the first few notes of the song, this time in the right order. The melody came out uneven at first, his memory rusty and unsure. But after a few seconds, the notes began to flow and the music filled the quiet lobby. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but the girl's eyes lit up as if she recognized it immediately. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the one I played backwards." He smiled, still focused on the keys. "I used to hear it all the time when I was little. My mother loved it." "She must have been nice," the girl said softly. "She was," he replied, and his voice caught for a moment. He hadn't spoken about his mother in years. When the last note faded, they both sat quietly. The sound seemed to linger in the air even after it was gone. "See?" she said finally. "You still remember?" Ethan turned to her, smiling. "Maybe I do." They both laughed quietly, and for a few seconds, the weight of his world, the meetings, the deals, the endless rush disappeared. Not long after, a man in a work shirt walked into the lobby, holding a small case of tools. His face lit up when he saw the girl. "There you are," he said warmly. "I told you not to go far." "I was just practicing," she said, hopping off the stool. "And he played too." She pointed at Ethan proudly. The man chuckled. "Is that so?" Ethan stood and smiled politely. "Your daughter's quite talented." The man wiped his hands on his shirt. "Thank you. She loves it more than anything. I keep telling her music won't pay bills, but she doesn't believe me." "She shouldn't," Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. The man looked at him, a bit surprised, but then nodded. "Maybe you're right." The girl tugged on her father's sleeve. "Can we come again tomorrow?" "Please," he laughed. "We'll see how much work I have. If we finish early, maybe." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need a piano to practice on," he said, handing it to the father. "I own a few properties with instruments that don't get much use." "You're both welcome." The man hesitated, clearly unsure. "That's very kind, sir, but no conditions," Ethan said gently. "Just music." The father accepted the card with a small, grateful nod. "Thank you, truly." The girl smiled up at him. "Thank you, mister." Ethan smiled back. "Keep playing. You have something special." As they walked away, he watched them go, the father with his toolkit, the daughter skipping beside him, humming softly. The melody she hummed was the same one she'd played the day before, backward again. He turned back toward the piano and sat down once more. The lobby was almost empty now, only the soft clatter of dishes from the cafe nearby. He rested his hands on the keys and tried playing again. This time he played slowly, letting each note breathe. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about control. It was just music. By the time he stopped, the morning sun had moved higher in the sky, painting golden lines across the marble floor. He felt different, lighter somehow. As he stood to leave, the hotel manager approached holding a small envelope. "Mr. Hale," the man said politely. "This was left at the front desk for you." Ethan took it, curious. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a few uneven lines drawn across it. A child's attempt at musical notes. At the bottom, in wobbly handwriting, were 4 words. "Play it forward now." He smiled, a real smile this time, and tucked the note into his jacket pocket. The rest of the day, he carried that little piece of paper with him everywhere he went. Through meetings, calls, and endless discussions, it stayed there, like a quiet reminder that somewhere between all his plans and goals, a little girl had shown him how to listen again. The next few days passed quietly, but something inside Ethan had shifted. He went about his usual business in meetings, calls, dinners, and constant movement. Yet he felt a kind of stillness underneath it all. Every time he sat in a car or waited for an elevator, the same melody would return to him. That little song, the one he'd heard backward first. He had always been good at remembering details, market trends, client preferences, investment numbers. But this song, it clung to him in a different way. It wasn't something he needed to remember. It was something he couldn't forget. He caught himself one evening standing near his office window, looking out over the city as the lights began to flicker on. The skyline glittered like 1,000 tiny promises. He should have felt proud. He'd built this life brick by brick, deal by deal. Yet for the first time, the view didn't fill him with satisfaction. It just looked quiet. He turned from the glass and walked over to the piano in the corner of his office. It had been there for years, more as decoration than anything else. He lifted the cover and pressed a single key. The sound echoed faintly in the large room. The notes came awkwardly at first. His fingers were stiff, unsure. But the melody returned as if it had been waiting for him. He started to play hesitantly at first, then with more confidence. When he finished, he sat still for a long time, hands resting on the keys. There was something peaceful about it. Something honest. No one was watching, no one was judging. It was just him and the sound. The next morning, he went back to the Grand Marlowe Hotel. It wasn't planned. He just found himself walking through the doors. The same familiar scent of coffee and polished floors greeted him. He didn't see the girl or her father anywhere, and for a moment he felt a small pang of disappointment. He sat near the window again and ordered tea instead of coffee this time. He kept glancing toward the piano, hoping she might appear. Hours passed, and she didn't. By afternoon, he decided to leave. But just as he was about to stand, he heard a familiar laugh, a small, cheerful sound that cut through the quiet. He turned, and there she was, skipping beside her father, the same ribbon bouncing in her hair. She noticed him almost instantly and waved. "You came back," he smiled. "So did you," her father greeted him politely. "Good afternoon, sir. She's been asking if we could stop by again. I didn't think we'd see you here." "I find myself coming here more often these days," Ethan admitted. "I guess I enjoy the music," the girl giggled. "I learned a new song." He raised an eyebrow. "Another one backwards?" She nodded proudly. "Yes, want to hear it?" "Of course." She ran to the piano and climbed onto the stool, her small fingers ready. The moment she began to play, the lobby seemed to soften again. The melody wasn't perfect. Some notes came late, some early. But there was something sincere in the way she played. Every note had life in it. People began to slow down as they passed. A couple paused to listen. Even one of the hotel staff leaned on a nearby desk, smiling. When she finished, the room felt brighter. "That was wonderful," Ethan said, clapping softly. Her father laughed quietly. She's been practicing that one all week. Said she wanted to surprise you. Ethan blinked. Me? The girl nodded shyly. You liked the last one, so I wanted to play a new one for you. He didn't know what to say for a moment. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Her father looked between them and smiled. You must have made quite an impression, sir. She talks about you whenever she plays now. Ethan chuckled softly. She made an impression on me first. They all laughed lightly, and for a while the three of them sat together near the piano, talking about music, school, and simple things. It felt strangely easy, the kind of effortless conversation he hadn't had in years. After some time, the father checked his watch. I need to get upstairs. They've got another piano for me to tune. Will you be all right here, kiddo? I'll be fine, she said, already opening her small notebook filled with scribbles of songs. Ethan offered. She can play here. I'll keep an eye on her if that's okay. The man hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Thank you. I won't be long. As soon as he left, the girl turned to Ethan and whispered, Can I show you something? He nodded. She opened her notebook and pointed to a page where she'd written what looked like small, uneven music notes with a pencil. This is a song I made up. My dad says it doesn't make sense, but I think it sounds like a story. He looked closer. The notes weren't perfect, but they had rhythm, a pattern. You wrote this yourself? Uh-huh. Want to hear it? Please. She started to play, slow and careful. The tune was unfamiliar, but it had emotion, a kind of hopeful sadness. It wasn't something she copied. It came from her. As he listened, Ethan felt that same pull in his chest again. The song sounded like something that didn't know whether it wanted to laugh or cry. When she finished, he said softly, That was beautiful. You really did tell a story, she smiled. You think so? I do. It sounds like someone remembering something important. She tilted her head. Like you when you remember your mom's song? His breath caught for a second. Yes, exactly like that. They both sat in silence for a while, the afternoon light spilling through the windows. It was a peaceful silence, not awkward, just warm. After a few minutes, her father returned, wiping his hands. All done. Time to go, sweetheart. She slid off the stool but turned back quickly. Can I play here again tomorrow? Ethan smiled. I'll be here if you do, the father chuckled. Looks like we've got a new audience then. They said goodbye and left, but the sound of their laughter lingered long after they were gone. That evening, Ethan didn't go home right away. He stayed at the piano trying to play the little girl's tune from memory. He got most of it wrong, but he didn't mind. It made him smile. The next morning, he arrived at the hotel before sunrise. The lobby was almost empty, quiet except for the soft hum of cleaners finishing their work. He sat by the piano again, waiting. When the girl and her father finally walked in later that morning, she ran straight to him. You came early, he laughed. I guess I didn't want to miss the concert. She looked thrilled. Then you have to help me this time. I want to make a song with you. Me? Yes. You play the first part and I'll play the next. He hesitated, then nodded. All right. Let's try. She showed him a few simple notes, and together they began. The melody that formed was rough but sweet. Two people from completely different worlds building something together, one key at a time. When they finished, she clapped her hands. We did it. It sounds happy, he smiled. It does. Her father watched from a few steps away, smiling quietly. When their song ended, he walked over and said, You know, she hasn't been this excited about playing in a long time. Ethan looked at the girl, her eyes glowing with joy, and said softly, She reminded me how to listen again. Maybe we both needed that, the man nodded. Maybe you did. They exchanged a simple handshake, and for a brief second, Ethan realized something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. Not the kind that came from business or deals, but something real. As the day went on, Ethan stayed longer than planned, helping the girl create small tunes, listening to her laugh when he hit the wrong notes. It was the most human thing he'd done in a very long time. By evening, as the light faded and the hotel grew quiet again, he stood and looked at the piano one last time before leaving. The keys gleamed softly, waiting. He reached into his pocket and touched the folded paper she'd given him days earlier, the one that said, Play it forward now. He smiled to himself. For the first time, he understood exactly what that meant. The next few mornings became a quiet routine. Ethan would stop by the Grand Marlowe Hotel before his office, often pretending it was just to check in on something. But everyone who worked there already noticed the pattern. The man who once walked fast and spoke only about business now moved slower, smiled more, and always stopped near the piano. The little girl was usually there with her father, waiting for him to finish his tuning work. The two of them had become a small part of Ethan's mornings, something he never planned for but had grown to look forward to. Every time she played, she brought something new. Sometimes it was a song she'd practiced from her notebook. Other times it was just her fingers wandering across the keys, making soft mistakes and laughing when she hit the wrong notes. Ethan didn't care about the mistakes. They made it real. One morning she arrived later than usual. Ethan was already sitting near the window, stirring his coffee, glancing toward the lobby doors every few minutes. When she finally appeared, she looked a little tired, and her father seemed distracted. He smiled politely at Ethan. "Morning, sir. Sorry, we're late." "Rough day already," Ethan stood. "Everything all right?" The man sighed and nodded slowly. "Just work piling up. Some clients haven't paid on time, and I had to take a few extra jobs. It's nothing serious." Ethan looked at the man's worn hands, the kind that told stories of years spent fixing, building, and working hard. "If you ever need help," the man interrupted gently. "Thank you, but we'll manage." "We always do." Ethan respected that answer. He knew pride when he saw it. The girl climbed onto the piano stool, rubbing her eyes but smiling when she saw him. "I made a new tune," she said, opening her little notebook again. "Another original?" Ethan asked, his tone light. She nodded proudly. "It's about rain," he chuckled. "Rain?" "Yeah, I like how it sounds when it falls on the window. It makes a rhythm." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Then let's hear the rain." She began to play, and sure enough, it sounded like falling drops. Slow, uneven, sometimes quiet, sometimes louder. Her fingers tapped gently, and the notes felt alive. People passing by started to slow down again, some even stopping to listen. When she finished, the lobby broke into small, polite applause. Her cheeks turned pink as she giggled and hid her face in her hands. Ethan clapped the loudest. "That was wonderful," he said. "You really made it sound like rain," she grinned. "Do you think so?" "I know so." Her father smiled softly from across the lobby, watching them both. He finished his work not long after and walked over, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Say thank you, sweetheart. We have to get going." She turned to Ethan. "Will you come tomorrow too?" "I wouldn't miss it," he said. As they left, the man gave a small nod, almost like a silent thank you, and Ethan returned it with a smile. Later that day, Ethan sat in his office, his phone buzzing constantly with calls and reminders, yet he couldn't focus. The sound of the girl's rain song kept echoing in his head. He picked up his pen and began to write a few notes on paper, something he hadn't done in decades. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but it felt right. When he played it later on his office piano, he realized he was trying to recreate her tune. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. For once, the sound of his own mistakes didn't bother him. That evening, he thought about her father's words, about late payments and extra jobs. It stayed with him. The next morning, he arrived at the hotel early again. The girl and her father weren't there yet, so he spoke quietly to the hotel manager. "I'd like to arrange something," Ethan said. "The man who tunes your pianos, I want him to be on retainer. Pay him monthly, even if there's no job that week." The manager blinked. "That's generous, sir. But may I ask why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because sometimes good people deserve a little help, especially when they don't ask for it." When the father arrived later that morning, the manager discreetly handed him the news. The man tried to protest, but the arrangement was already signed and settled. Ethan just waved from his seat near the window as if nothing had happened. The man approached him afterward. "Sir, I don't know what to say," Ethan smiled. "Then don't, just keep playing. Both of you." The man's eyes softened. "You don't know what this means to us." "Maybe I do," Ethan said quietly. "Maybe more than you think." The little girl ran up then, holding her notebook. "Guess what?" she said excitedly. "My teacher said I can join a small music show next month. They let kids play their own songs." Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's incredible." She nodded, grinning from ear to ear. "I want to play the one I made up, the rain song, but I get nervous when people watch." He leaned closer and said softly, "Then don't play for them. Play to someone." Pretend it's just you and that one person. She tilted her head. Like who? Whoever makes you feel safe. She thought for a second, then whispered, you maybe? He smiled. Then that's perfect. Over the next few days, they practiced together whenever they met. He'd hum along or tap the rhythm gently on the table while she played. Each time she improved a little more. Sometimes other guests would stop to listen and smile. Some even asked her name and she'd answer proudly, though always hiding half her face behind her hands. Ethan started to notice something about himself, too. The more time he spent there, the less he cared about his phone. He'd forget it on the table sometimes. His assistant once called to remind him about a meeting, and for the first time he said, "Tell them I'll be late." He wasn't sure what was changing inside him, but he didn't fight it. He felt lighter, not happier in a loud way, just peaceful. One afternoon as she practiced, she stopped halfway and frowned. "It doesn't sound right," she said. "Something's missing." "What do you think it needs?" Ethan asked. She tapped her chin. "Maybe a higher part, like sunlight after rain." He smiled at the way she described it. "Let's find your sunlight then." Together, they tried different notes until she found one that fit. When she finally played it through, she laughed out loud. "That's it. That's the sound." Her father clapped from across the room. "Sounds perfect to me." The girl turned to Ethan. "You're coming to my show, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," he said again. But when the day of the show finally came, Ethan found himself caught between two worlds. A major business meeting had been scheduled for the same evening, one he couldn't easily skip. It was an international call that would decide the future of a large deal. He stared at his calendar, then at the small invitation the girl had given him. It had her name written in colorful letters with a small doodle of a piano at the bottom. His assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, the meeting's confirmed for 6 o'clock. Ethan nodded slowly. "Push it to 7, but they're in a different time zone. Then they'll wait." He left the office early that evening and drove straight to the community hall where the children's music show was being held. The place was simple, folding chairs, paper decorations, and proud parents with cameras ready. He spotted the girl immediately. She wore a neat little dress and the same ribbon in her hair. When she saw him, her face lit up like the lights on stage. "You came," she whispered when he reached her. "I told you I would." Her father smiled, shaking his hand. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes," Ethan said softly. "I did." When her turn came, she walked nervously to the piano. Her fingers trembled slightly, but when she looked into the crowd, her eyes found Ethan's. He gave her a small nod. She began to play. The first few notes were soft and uncertain, but soon the melody flowed. It was her rain song, gentle, thoughtful, and alive. When the sunlight part arrived, the room seemed to brighten just a little. When she finished, there was silence for half a second, and then applause filled the room. The little girl bowed shyly, her face glowing. Ethan clapped harder than anyone, feeling his eyes sting slightly. After the show, she ran up to him, still holding her sheet music. "Did I do okay?" He smiled. "You did more than okay. You made people feel something." She grinned, then handed him her paper. "I want you to have this. It's the song we made together." He looked down at the scribbled notes and felt something tighten in his chest. "I'll keep it safe," he said. That night, as he drove home, the city lights blurred outside his window. He realized he hadn't thought about his meeting once. The song still played in his mind, not backward this time, but forward, full of warmth and hope. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The weeks after the concert felt unusually quiet for Ethan. He still visited the Grand Marlowe Hotel sometimes, but now the piano sounded a little different. The girl and her father had stopped coming as often. The front desk clerk mentioned that the man had found more work, which meant fewer mornings free for piano practice. Ethan understood, yet he missed the sound of those soft morning notes. The lobby felt incomplete without them. He had gotten used to that small moment of calm before his day began. The little girl's laughter, the simple music, the way she could turn something ordinary into something meaningful. One evening, he sat in his apartment by the window, watching rain fall against the glass. It reminded him of her song again. He picked up the paper she'd given him, the one with her handwritten notes and the little doodle of a sun and raindrops at the top. It was slightly wrinkled now, but still perfect in its own way. He sat down at his piano and began to play it slowly. His fingers stumbled through the melody at first, but he found the rhythm after a few minutes. It wasn't as magical as when she played it, but he could still feel the same warmth in each note. Halfway through, his phone started ringing. He almost ignored it but glanced at the screen. It was a major client calling from overseas. He hesitated, then smiled softly to himself. He turned the phone face down and kept playing. The music filled the room, blending with the sound of rain outside. For the first time in years, he didn't care about losing a call or missing a deal. He only cared about the moment. That night, he made a quiet decision. The next morning, he visited the hotel again, this time carrying something wrapped in brown paper. The staff greeted him as usual, surprised to see him so early. He asked if they'd seen the little girl or her father lately. Not in a few days, the clerk said, but they'll probably stop by soon. Ethan nodded and placed the wrapped package carefully on top of the piano. When they come, he said, please give this to them. Then he left without saying more. Inside the package was a small note that read, for the girl who taught me how to listen again. And beneath it, a simple music box that played her rain song when opened, recorded exactly as she had performed it. A few days later, the father and daughter came to the hotel again. The girl ran to the piano as usual but stopped when she saw the package waiting there. Her father read the note out loud and her eyes widened. She opened the box, and as the melody began to play, she gasped softly. That's my song, she said in wonder. It's my rain song. Her father smiled, his eyes a little misty. He must have done this for you. She listened to the tune all the way through, holding the box close to her ear. When it stopped, she whispered, "Can we see him and say thank you?" Her father nodded, and they decided to visit Ethan's office later that afternoon. When they arrived, his secretary led them inside immediately. Ethan stood up from his desk, surprised but happy to see them. The girl ran up to him, holding the music box. "You made this," she said. He smiled. "I had some help, but yes. Do you like it?" She nodded eagerly. "It's perfect. It sounds just like when I play." Her father stepped forward, extending his hand. "We can't thank you enough," he said. "You didn't have to go through all that trouble." Ethan shook his hand warmly. "It wasn't trouble. It was a gift. For both of us." They talked for a while, laughing and sharing small stories. The father mentioned that his daughter had been accepted into a beginner's music program offered by a local art center. It wasn't expensive, but it was a good start. Ethan felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself, but in seeing how far she'd come. Before they left, she looked up at him and said shyly, "Will you come when I play next time?" He chuckled softly. "You know my answer." She smiled, satisfied, and waved goodbye. After they left, Ethan stood by the window watching them cross the street together. The little girl was skipping, her music box held tightly against her chest. Something inside him felt complete. Over the next few months, life moved on. The city grew busier, and so did he, but everything felt different now. He still worked hard, still led meetings and made decisions, but there was a softness in how he spoke to people. He'd started listening more, rushing less. His employees noticed it too. One afternoon, his assistant came into his office holding a letter. "This came for you," she said. No return address. He opened it carefully. Inside was a small folded paper with uneven handwriting. "Dear Mr. Ethan, we moved to another town because my dad got a better job. He tunes pianos in a big theater now. I started my new music class too. They said I can play in a real recital soon. Thank you for the box. I play it every night before bed. It helps me dream about songs. Love, your piano friend." Ethan read the letter twice. Then he folded it gently and placed it inside the same folder where he kept her original music sheet. That evening, he went to the hotel again. The piano stood quietly in the corner, waiting. He sat down and began to play her rain song once more, softly, slowly, as if she were still there beside him. A few guests stopped to listen, just as they used to. Some smiled, recognizing the tune that had once filled the lobby every morning. When he finished, he stayed there for a moment, his hands still resting on the keys. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, voices echoing, phones ringing, but inside that small space everything felt calm. He realized something that night. The little girl hadn't just given him music. She had given him back his sense of wonder. The ability to feel something real again after years of living behind walls of noise and responsibility. He stood, smiled at the piano and whispered quietly, "Thank you." As he walked away, the sound of rain began outside once more, light and steady. He paused at the door, listening. It almost sounded like the beginning of her song. He didn't need to look back. The memory was already written deep inside him. From that day on, whenever he passed by a piano in a lobby, a restaurant, or a friend's home, he would sit for a moment, touch the keys and play just a few notes of her song. Not to perform, not to impress, but simply to remember. And sometimes strangers would stop and listen, smiling without knowing why. That was enough. Years later, at a charity event organized by a local arts foundation, Ethan was invited as one of the sponsors. He didn't know much about the performers, only that the evening was meant to support young musicians. The lights dimmed, and the host announced the final act. "Please welcome a talented young pianist who will play her original composition, Rain and Sunlight." Ethan froze in his seat. The name hit him instantly. A young woman walked onto the stage, calm and confident. Her hair was longer now, but she still had that same quiet smile. When she sat at the piano, he recognized the way her fingers touched the keys. Careful, emotional, full of life. The first notes began, and Ethan felt the years melt away. It was her song, the same one she'd played backward in a hotel lobby so long ago, now transformed into something richer, deeper, more beautiful. The audience was silent, captivated. When she reached the sunlight part, Ethan felt his eyes sting again. He didn't care who saw. He was proud, deeply, quietly proud. When the piece ended, the applause filled the hall. The young pianist stood and gave a small bow, her eyes scanning the crowd. Then she saw him. For a second, she froze, then smiled, the same bright, innocent smile he remembered. Ethan stood and clapped, his heart full. After the show, she found him in the lobby. "I told you I'd keep playing," she said softly. He laughed. "You did more than that. You made the world listen." They talked for a while, catching up, sharing stories. When she mentioned she was teaching music to children now, he smiled. "You're giving what you were given," he said. She nodded. "It's what you taught me, to listen." Before they said goodbye, she reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. "I made another song," she said. "But this one's for you." He took it gently, already knowing he would treasure it like the others. As she walked away, he felt the same calm peace he had felt that first day in the hotel lobby, when a little girl played his favorite song backward, and something inside him quietly changed forever.